it is not me on the cover, even though everybody thinks it is, because I am frequently seen sitting at a bar with a martini in my hand, just like that. But my editors didn't, their designers had never met me, but they really nailed it. No, but the book is women's fiction novel about Cinnamon Scott, who is a party girl, kind of aimless, dealing with some demons from her past. And when her sister gets pregnant and is in London and has complications with the pregnancy, Cinnamon rushes to London to the Savoy where her sister's staying to help out. And while her sister's resting, Cinnamon is wandering the halls of the Savoy Hotel and finds the iconic American bar. And she's whiling away the late nights, drinking martinis, and she meets a bartender there who starts to tell her this incredible story of the real life first female mixologist, Ada Coleman. And Cinnamon is fascinated and goes to look up Ada Coleman and finds, and this is true because I had the same experience. I did this. I looked up Ada Coleman. I said, oh, this woman sounds amazing. And there's almost nothing about her. And I was shocked about that. And Cinnamon in the book is shocked about that. And so she's determined to learn more about this real life woman. And so the book is about Cinnamon and her sister and their relationship and their journey, but along the way, Cinnamon is uncovering the real life history of this incredible female mixologist from the past. I certainly had to spend a lot of time at bars doing very important research for this book. One of the beautiful things about writing a book about a famous hotel, a famous bar, a famous bartender is basically anytime I'm sitting at the bar, I can call it research. So that was very fun. But yeah, mixology is, there are mixologists and there are bartenders, and many people who work behind the bar are both. But mixologists really are the people that craft the cocktails, that say, I'm going to put this much of this much of that, mix it together and create new cocktails or refine or tweak, existing classic cocktails. Whereas bartenders are creating cocktails that mixologists have made. So both are in the art of the cocktail, but mixologists are the ones that are, it's almost like a chemistry project or like being a chef. Like they really are actually creating what these cocktails become. And that was something that was really starting to be developed in the late 1800s. And so in 1903, when Ada Coleman became a bartender, she really had a passion for mixology. She had an older bartender who she had worked with taught her how to make a drink. The first drink she ever made was a Manhattan. And she was fascinated by it and she had a skill for it. And fortunately, the owners of the Savoy Hotel, who were theater impresarios and theater producers, saw this woman who not only was brilliant at creating cocktails, but also just had a charisma and had a way behind the bar. She was witty, she was funny. She really could almost put on a show with her mixology. And so even though at the time, this was 1903 when she started, women weren't even allowed in cocktail bars, she was made the head bartender at the American bar at the Savoy and worked there for 25 years, creating many of the cocktails that we have still heard of today. But what fascinated me about her story is a lot of the cocktails she created are in the Savoy cocktail book, which is a real life, like still the most influential cocktail book in existence. And it came out 2 years after she retired. And her name is nowhere on the book. The only name on the book is the man who worked under her for many, many years. And so, it's unfortunate. We see it all the time, women getting written out of history. But I was really interested in a fun, novel way of taking up Ada's cause and making sure that people have heard of her again. If nothing else, if people read the book and go get on the computer and Google her, I will feel like I've done something right. She, from everything I've learned about her, she really was a character. And if there's only one surviving picture of her, and I have one somewhere, and she was, like I said, very charismatic, but wasn't traditionally beautiful. So she wasn't somebody that, was trading on her looks. So there you can see. That's what she looked like. I mean, kind of not the person you'd expect behind the bar serving cocktails. But she started work when she was 25 years old, which even then was considered old for a woman. And she was unmarried. and she worked there until she was 50 years old. So really, she again, she wasn't trading on her looks. She wasn't there to be a femme fatale. She was sassy, she was witty. Men absolutely would hit on her, but she would have a quick comeback for them. And she became known as somebody that, like, you're not gonna mess with. Like, you're gonna treat her well, or you're not gonna get your cocktail. And that really was her shtick. And I think men found that highly amusing because it was just so unusual. And and so she really played on that. And also the owners of the Savoy took really good care of her. They cared about her. She was part of the Savoy family, so they protected her. So if there was ever going to be something or somebody that really was behaving badly, they had her back. And I think that helped allow her to be the personality that she was without having to worry that something bad was going to happen when she walked out the back door, to go home at night. Well, so there is not a lot about her, and the Savoy is incredible because they actually employ a full-time archivist, which is really amazing. That's the level of respect they have for the history of this hotel, because it really is such an iconic place. And so I talked with her and tried to find what I could find, but there isn't a lot. And so part of why I wrote the novel is because I'm not a historian, and I thought, how can I tell this story and imagine what it might have been, but without having to say, oh yeah, this is exactly what happened. And so in the book, Cinnamon, the love interest, is a historian who is at the Savoy at the same time as Cinnamon is, and he's writing an actual history of the Savoy. And so it gives them a chance to talk, and he says, we know that she worked here for 25 years, but she said, I'm not finding a lot about her, so it's hard to put her in the history book. And Cinnamon says, yes, but we know for sure she was here. We know exactly what was going on at the hotel, in the bar, during these times. So it's not a huge leap to know that she was part of all these stories. She just wasn't included in the history, as so often happened with the women. And so it's sort of an interesting conversation about how history is remembered, and Cinnamon kind of compares it to, like, a photo is what's written down, but it's like the negative of the photo. It's the spaces in between what you see, which is where Ada existed. And what we do know is all of the celebrities of the time came to see her, came to try her drinks. She was very involved in the theater. The Savoy Theater was connected to the hotel. She was very involved in that. She would host cast parties at her home after hours. I mean, she really was this incredible personality. And at the time there were articles in the paper about her, and people came from all over the world, but unfortunately it was just all lost. But the Savoy was a very theatrical place, and so you can absolutely see how she would have been a huge draw. Again, men only, because it was only men were allowed in the bar. And also, just as a side note, it was called the American bar, but there was nothing. Europe invented the concept of American bars, which meant they served American style cocktails versus a British pub that would serve, classic British fare and beer. And so an American bar actually is a European creation. So but at that American bar, I mean, Oscar Wilde, Charlie Chaplin came over to see her. A lot of the playwrights of the time, J.M. Barrie, who wrote Peter Pan, George Bernard Shaw, all of the literary types, Mark Twain, a lot of people like that would specifically come. It was considered a very literary, a very creative spot, because the Savoy Hotel was the first luxury hotel built in London, because at the time London wasn't a vacation destination. It's cold. Like, if you were going to go to a luxury hotel, you'd go to the south of France, or you'd go to one of the German spa towns, but you wouldn't come to London. But the Savoy Theater was so successful because of writers called Gilbert and Sullivan, who wrote Pirates of Penzance and all the operettas. The people started coming from all around to see these shows. And so actually the Savoy Hotel was built from the proceeds of theater. And so that was something that was also fascinating to me about the hotel, because Gilbert and Sullivan basically created musical theater, like the early versions of musical theater. And so to realize that the entire luxury hotel scene was built off the back of theater, especially when you think about that now, and you think about like I'm sitting here above Times Square, another neighborhood that was built off of the success of the theaters. It became a really fun story to tell. You know, the Savoy was the first hotel to have electricity because they wanted electricity in the theater. And so they built an entire electrical grid so that they could create theater magic with lights and, you know, just all kinds of things like that that I learned as part of doing research for this project.